The slaver had 20 feet of chain and 6 orcs at the end of it when the trapper stepped out of the tree line and held up a single rolled pelt. "That," he said, "for all 6. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for anything else. He stood in the middle of the road and waited. The road was empty in both directions. Snow had come in the night and buried the wheel ruts, and the sky above the pines sat flat and the color of old pewter, the kind of grey that meant more snow before dark. The cold had no edge to it. That was the worst kind. It did not cut. It simply pressed, slow and even, until what it touched gave up its warmth without knowing. The slaver's horse stopped. The man looked down at the trapper, then at the pelt, then at the trapper again. He was a lean man, weathered, the kind who had made calculations like this one before. He did not speak for a long time. Behind him, the 6 orcs had stopped too. They were tall, all of them, taller than the trapper by a head or better, broad through the chest and shoulder in the way of people made for country that expected things of them. The chain ran wrist to wrist down the line, 6 pairs of hands, and the slack of it lay in the snow between their feet. They had been walking since before light. He could see it in how they stood. Not broken, not slumped, just settled into the weight of it. The way stone settles into earth. None of them looked at the pelt. They looked at him. The trapper did not look away. The slaver leaned down and took the pelt. He worked the binding loose with one hand, unrolled it part way in the cold air, turned it toward what light the sky was giving. His breath came out white. He was quiet for a time. Then he looked at his 6 captives, who had walked 10 days and eaten his grain every night, and he looked at the pelt, and whatever arithmetic he was running came out the same way twice. He held out his hand. One of his men put a key in it. The first lock opened. The chain fell and lay in the snow. The second, the third. One at a time, down the line. Without a word from anyone, without ceremony, each lock making its small flat sound in the cold, and then going quiet. When it was done, the 6 orcs stood free in the road. They did not run. They did not speak. The column closed back around the space they had left, and the horses found a little more speed in their step, lighter now, and none of the men looked back. The trapper looked at the 6 orcs. The 6 orcs looked at the trapper. They were not grateful. They were not relieved. Those were things that came later, if they came at all. What they were was watchful, the flat and patient watchfulness of something that has learned not to name a change in its situation until the change has shown what it is. He understood that. He had spent the best thing he owned on a frozen road in the middle of nowhere, for reasons he was still forming words for. By the time he had the words, 3 weeks had passed, and the road had sent something back to collect. 3 weeks before the road, the trapper was checking his line at first light when he found what the trap had taken in the night. He crouched and looked at it for a long time. It was a large animal, larger than anything the line had given him in years, and pale, the fur so dense and close that he had to push his hand into the wrist before he found the skin beneath. He had seen this kind twice in 30 years of working with this country, and caught it once before, badly, and lost it to a thaw before he got back. He stood over it in the snow, with his breath coming white and slow, and did not move for a while. Then he dressed it carefully, the way he did the things that mattered, without hurry and without waste, and rolled the pelt and wrapped it and carried it home. The cabin sat at the end of a lane of packed earth and frozen mud. The fence on the north side leaned where the posts had softened underground, and no one had gotten to them. The roof sagged at the eastern end, where a bad winter 3 years back had put too much weight on it, and he had patched it with what he had, and told himself he would do it properly in the spring, and had not. The fields beyond the fence were under snow. He had not planted in 2 years. The ground was still good, he simply had not planted. Inside, a table, 2 chairs, a fire he kept going through the night. He set the pelt on the table and built the fire, and stood with his coat still on, and looked at it for a while. The second chair sat where she had put it, angled a little toward the fire. He had not moved it. He did not look at it directly when he passed. It was simply there, the way things are simply there, when you have stopped deciding what to do with them. She had been gone 4 years. He did not think about her the way he had in the first year. He thought about her the same amount. He had just stopped calling it grief. He had stopped calling it a lot of things. It was easier to not call them anything, to leave them sitting the way you leave a chair sitting, in the place it ended up, without deciding what to do with it. He could work, he could run his line, he could skin a catch and tan a hide and carry it home before dark. He had done harder things. The pelt was the finest thing he owned, and likely the finest thing he had ever taken. He thought about trading it at the post in the spring, what it would bring, whether to hold it until the buyers came north or sell it early while the season was right. He could not decide. He bound it and put it in his pack and stopped thinking about it. He ran the line every second day. The rest of the time he cut wood, patched what he could reach, cooked what he had, slept when it went dark. He had stopped keeping track of the days of the week some time ago. They were all the same kind of day. Then the cold set in harder, and he walked the west road to check a far line he had not reached in 10 days, and the road bent where it always bent between the 2 big pines, and around that bend he heard horses. He was not looking for anything. He had not been for a long time. He came around the bend where the 2 big pines stood and stopped. The column was maybe 40 yards ahead. A man on a horse at the front, 2 more riders behind, and strung between the horses and the far tree line, 6 figures in chains, walking. They moved the way things move when moving is the only option left, 1 foot and then the other, not stopping, not looking up. The trapper stood in the road and watched them come. 6 orcs, 3 men and 3 women, though at this distance it took him a moment to be sure. They were all of them large, a full head taller than either of the riders, broad through the chest and shoulder, built for country that expected things of them. Their clothes were wrong for the cold. The chains ran from the wrist of one to the wrist of the next, and the slack gathered and lifted with each step in a way that was hard to look at for long. Their faces were closed, not angry, not afraid, just closed, the way a door is closed when whoever is behind it has stopped expecting it to open. The lead rider saw him and slowed. The column slowed with him and stopped. Neither man spoke first. The cold worked at all of them for a moment. One of the horses shifted in its harness. The trapper did not move. Then his hand went to his pack. He opened it, took the pelt out, held it up so the rider could see it clearly, and set it on the snow in the middle of the road between them. Nobody spoke. The rider looked at the pelt for a while. He was a practical man. You could see it in how he held himself in the saddle. He looked at the pelt the way a man looks at something that solves a problem he has had for 10 days, which was 6 people who could not work and required feeding, and had slowed his pace by a third, and were due to a buyer who would pay less than the contract if they arrived thin. He dismounted. He crouched and unrolled the pelt in the snow. He stood up. He looked at the trapper. He looked at his 6 captives. He looked at the pelt. He picked it up. Then he unlocked them, one at a time, working down the line without speaking, and the chain came off each wrist and fell. The 6 orcs stood where they were. They did not run. They had not been told yet that it was over, and they were waiting to be told. The rider remounted. The column moved and did not look back. The 6 orcs stood in the snow and looked at the trapper. He had never been this close to one of them, let alone 6. They were very large. Even cold and worn and 10 days into the road, they were very large. The nearest one, a woman, watched him with something he could not name. Not anger, not hope. Something that had learned not to spend itself on either. One of the men had a chain scar at his wrist and was rubbing it without looking down. He thought about all of this for about a second. "My cabin is north of here," he said. "Half a day's walk." He turned and started walking. He did not check whether they followed. They followed, not because they trusted him, because it was cold and the road behind them was empty and there was no one left to tell them what to do. They walked north. The trapper kept to the road for the first mile, then turned onto the track that cut through the trees toward his cabin. He walked ahead. The 6 orcs walked behind him, spread out in a loose line, and he could hear them, their footsteps in the snow, the sound of breathing, the particular weight of 6 large bodies moving through cold air. The track was narrow, and the snow was deeper in the trees, and it was slow going. Nobody had spoken since the road. He had been alone a long time. He had forgotten what it felt like to be heard. Not watched, not threatened. Just heard, the way you know a room is occupied even when it is quiet. The track bent east between 2 ridges, and he felt someone come up beside him. Not close, not threatening, just level. He glanced over. The tallest of the 6 walked at his shoulder, a woman older than the others by the look of her, with the kind of steady pace that did not waste motion. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the track ahead, the same as he was. But she had chosen to walk beside him, and they both knew what that meant. The trapper looked forward again and kept walking. The cabin came into sight at the end of the track. Low against the tree line, boards dark with weather, a thread of smoke still rising from where he had left the fire banked that morning. The fence leaned on the north side. The roof sagged where it always sagged. He had stopped seeing those things a long time ago, the way a man stops seeing a scar. He did not take them to the cabin. He turned toward the barn. It was larger than the cabin, built for animals he no longer had, the door hanging straight at least, the inside dry and out of the wind. He pulled it open, and the smell of old hay came out. The hay was long dried. Whatever had lived there last was gone. Nothing remaining of it, but the cold and the dark and the space. He did not explain. He just opened the door. The youngest of the 6 went in first, a young man, and sat down against the far wall and closed his eyes almost before he was settled. The others filed in one by one. The tall woman was the last. She stood in the doorway and looked at the barn and then at the trapper. "For how long?" she said. Not a question exactly, a measurement. "As long as you need it," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once, the smallest possible version of a nod, and looked at the cabin. He went inside. He built the fire up, put water on, sat down at the table without taking his coat off for a while. He did not lock the door. He sat for a long time. The fire made its sounds. Outside, the wind moved through the trees and came back again, and now and then he could hear nothing from the barn at all, and now and then he thought he could hear something, though he was not sure it was different from the sound of the wind. Outside, through the one window, the light was going. He could not see the barn from where he sat. When he looked out later, the tall woman was still in the barn doorway, watching the cabin, watching the dark around it, watching the tree line beyond. She stood there for a long time. He went out before first light. The barn was still quiet. He walked around to the side, facing the tree line, and stopped. The tall woman was sitting with her back against the barn wall, legs out in front of her in the snow, watching the dark between the trees, the way someone watches a thing they are not sure has stopped moving. She was already awake before he was. She did not look at him when he came around the corner. He stood for a moment, and then went back to the cabin and made food. He left a pot at the barn door, enough for 6 people, more than he needed for himself. He did not knock. He did not wait. He went back in, shut his door, and didn't watch the window. None of the 6 came to the cabin that day. That was fine. He cut wood in the afternoon, stacking it close to the barn where it wouldn't get buried, and when he went out at dusk to collect the food pot, he found them sitting in the open barn doorway, all 6 in the last of the light. Not talking, just sitting in the cold air and watching it go dark the way anyone does when they have nowhere else they are going. They did not look at him when he picked up the pot. He did not look at them when he walked back. On the second morning, the tall woman was outside again before he was. The same spot. Back against the wall, eyes on the tree line. Watching. She was not doing anything else, only watching, the way a person watches when they have decided that watching is the job and they are good at it. He left the food without stopping and went to check a far line he had not reached in 2 days. He was gone most of the day. When he came back, the split wood that had been sitting in a pile outside the barn was stacked. Wood he had cut 2 weeks ago and never gotten around to stacking. Neatly done, against the south wall of the barn where it would stay dry. Someone had done it without asking, and without any announcement at all. He looked at it for a moment. He did not say anything. He went inside. He heard the cough that evening, through the wall. He had not noticed it on the road, or if he had not separated it from the sounds of moving through cold. Now he heard it clearly, coming and going in the quiet, one voice among the 6, and from the sound of it not a weather cough, not something that would pass in a day. He stood at the window and looked at the closed barn door for a while. He did not go out. The fire in the cabin was low. He had not built it up. He sat with the quiet for a while, listening to the barn wall and what came through it at intervals, slow and rough at its worst, nothing at its best. Instead, he went to the shelf where he kept his trade goods and wrapped what he had in a cloth, dried leaves that were good for breathing when steeped, a small clay pot of the salve he used when the cold settled into his chest. He took it to the barn door and set it next to the food pot and went back inside without knocking. He heard the barn door open. Then quiet. In the morning, the food pot was empty and the cloth was gone. On the 3rd day, he went out to check the far line and found one of them already there. Not the tall woman, not the young man. One of the 4, a broad-shouldered man, crouching in the snow 10 feet from one of the snares with his hands folded behind his back. Just looking at it, the way someone looks at a thing they have decided not to touch until they understand it. The trapper stopped. The orc did not startle. He knew someone was there. He had heard the trapper on the path, the same as the trapper had heard him. He did not look up. The trapper crouched beside the snare and tripped it with a stick and showed him how the spring worked, how the trigger sat, what happened when an animal hit the release. He did not say much. There was not much to say. He did not ask whether the orc wanted to know. He just showed him. The orc watched his hands with the same fixed attention He had given the snare. He reset it and moved on. He did not look back. That afternoon he came back to the cabin and found a fresh snare set at the place where an old one had collapsed in the weather. Set correctly, the trigger clear, the loop the right height. The orc had left without a word. Just the snare, set and ready. The trapper looked at it for a moment. Then he went inside. On the fourth day, the younger orc's cough had gotten worse. He had heard it through the night. In the morning it was there too, through the barn wall, deep and slow, the kind that takes something each time. He stood at the window for a while and looked at the closed barn door, and did not move. Then someone knocked on his cabin door. One knock, just one. He opened it, and the tall woman stood on the step. She did not speak. She looked at him once, and then looked back toward the barn. He got his coat. They went to the barn together. Inside, the younger orc was sitting against the far wall, not lying down, the way someone sits when they do not want to be caught lying down. Awake, but not well, the cough working through him in slow intervals. The other four were there, spread around the walls, and they all watched the trapper come in. He did not make it a ceremony. He put more hay down, built a small fire in the barn's iron box, brought water from the cabin and the rest of the herbs from the shelf and what clean cloth he could spare. He worked close and quiet, the way he worked when it was a thing that needed doing and not a thing that needed explaining. The younger orc watched his hands the whole time. Not the herbs, not the water. His hands. After a while, something moved through his face, something the cough had been covering for days. It was not trust yet. It was not relief. It was the thing that comes before those, when someone stops waiting for the next bad thing and just watches what is actually happening. The tall woman stayed in the barn doorway the whole time. The four others stayed where they were. Nobody spoke. When it was done, the trapper picked up the empty water cup and went back to the cabin. He had been at his fire for an hour when the cabin door opened. He had not locked it. The elder orc stood in the frame for a moment, and then came in and sat down across the fire from him on the floor, the way someone sits when there is no chair offered and they do not need one. She did not ask. She did not knock. She just came in and sat. He watched her settle. She was large, even seated, the kind of large that is less about height than about what a person has done with their years. She looked at the fire, and not at him. The trapper did not say anything. The fire went between them. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, and the cabin walls held it. He had not offered her a seat, and she had not asked for one. The second chair was still where it had always been. Neither of them sat in it. After a while, the only sounds were the fire and the wind and the particular quiet of two people who have not yet decided whether to speak. They stayed like that for a long time. Then the elder orc spoke. Not about the road. Not about the chains, or the column, or the cold. She spoke about a person. Someone she had been responsible for. Someone gone before any of this. Before the slavers. Before the road. Before the long march in the dark. She did not name the person. She said how young they had been, and what she had not done in time, and what had happened after. She said it plainly, without ornament, the way you say a thing you have said to yourself many times, but not yet to anyone else. Flat and even and final. The trapper listened. He did not say he was sorry. He did not say he understood. When she was done, he reached past the fire and set something on the ground between them. A small thing. A piece of carved horn, no longer than his thumb, worn smooth at the edges the way a thing gets worn when it has been held a long time. He did not explain it. The elder looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at him. "Who?" she said. "My wife," he said. 4 years ago. She had been sick for 2 of them. The elder looked at the carved piece of horn. She did not pick it up. She left it where he had put it, between them, in the space where the fire's heat came and went. She looked at it for a long time. The silence that came after was not the kind you fill. It was not the silence of 2 people who have run out of things to say. It was the kind that is the same as understanding, when 2 people have said the exact number of words required, and both of them know it, and there is nothing to add. After a while, the elder stood. She went to the door and stopped. She did not turn around. "You did not have to buy us," she said. "Not grateful. Not accusing. The way you say something that is true and has been true, and you are naming it because it should be named." The trapper looked at the fire. "I know," he said. The door opened and closed. He sat alone. He did not move the carved piece of horn from where he had set it. He left it on the ground, between the fire and the place she had been sitting, where it had been, between them. After a while, he put the fire down and went to sleep. In the morning, it was still there. He came out on the 6th morning, still pulling on his coat, and stopped. 3 of them were on the cabin roof. He had not heard them go up. They had done it while he was still inside, before he was dressed, before the fire was built. 3 large shapes moving carefully along the ridgeline, prying up boards that had gone soft in the winters and setting new ones from the stack beside the barn. That was where he kept the lumber he had cut 2 summers ago and not yet used. He stood and watched them for a moment. The far one was working at a board that had split 2 winters back. The middle one was on the ridge with a mallet, her weight balanced against the pitch without effort, the way someone moves on a roof who has been on roofs before. Then he got the tools they would need from the shed and stood below and handed them up when they were wanted. He did not say how to do it. They did not need him to. The work went steadily, the way work goes when the people doing it know what they are doing and are not wasting motion. By midday, the roof was better than it had been in 3 years. He stood at the corner of the cabin and looked at the new boards and did not say anything. The younger orc was moving again. Not well, not fully, but up and carrying things, stacking planks and handing up nails and not coughing every few steps. The trapper watched him from the corner of his eye and did not say anything about it. That evening he made food. He had been making it for himself and carrying a pot to the barn since the first night. This time he made more and kept making it, adding to the pot until the amount surprised him, and when it was done, he set it on the cabin steps and went back in for bowls. When he came back out, they were already there, the 6 of them, some on the steps and some in the barn doorway, and some just standing in the yard with the bowls he had not yet handed out. He handed them out. Nobody said anything about it being the first time. Nobody said anything at all. It was not a ceremony. It was just food, and enough of it, and everyone ate. After, the elder orc sat on the steps, and the trapper sat on the steps, and neither of them said anything for a while. The light was going. He looked at the fence. The posts had leaned since before any of this, since before the bad winter 3 years back, since before the last person who might have helped him fix them. The rails needed resetting. He had been meaning to get to it. He did not say anything about it. He went inside when it got dark and slept. In the morning, the fence posts on the north side were set straight, packed in fresh and tight, 3 of them that had been leaning at an angle for years. Half the fence, done. Someone had done it before light. He had not asked. He looked at the fence for a while. There were things in the world you asked for, and things that only worked if nobody asked. He had learned that in a different way, a long time ago, and had not thought about it again until now. He stood in the yard and looked at it and drank his morning water and did not say anything. Then he went to make breakfast for 8. The rider came down the lane in the middle of the 3rd week, alone. 1 horse, no weapons beyond a short knife at his belt that any traveller wore, a plain coat, road-worn, the kind a man wears when he spends more time on the road than off it. He had the look of a man who was used to arriving at places where he was not wanted, and had learned not to read faces until he had finished what he came to say. He came at a walk, not a hurry, which meant he was not afraid of what he might find, and had done this kind of errand before. The 6 orcs were at the fence line. They had been working it all morning, resetting the last of the north posts, and they heard the horse before the trapper did. He saw them stop and go still, the way people go still when they have learned that a horse on a road doesn't always mean nothing. He remembered that look. 6 large bodies with tools in their hands, not afraid, just watching, the way you watch a thing you cannot yet read. They did not run. The trapper walked out to the end of the lane and held up one hand. Not a greeting, just a way of placing himself between the rider and everything behind him. The rider stopped and looked past the trapper at the fence line and then back at him. He delivered his message the way men like him delivered messages, plain, without opinion, as if he had memorized someone else's words and was returning them. A representative of a trading operation had filed a claim. The road transaction was irregular. The Orcs had already been contracted to a named buyer before the column's leader accepted the pelt. The transaction might not be binding. Someone would come in person to assess. The trapper listened without moving. When the rider was done, he asked one question. Was the pelt legal tender on that road? The rider said it was. Then we're done, the trapper said. The rider looked at him for a moment. He was not convinced, and did not pretend to be. But he was a man who knew the difference between a thing he could act on and a thing he could not. He gathered his reins. Someone will still come, he said. Not a threat. A fact. I heard you, the trapper said. The rider went back down the lane and did not look back. The trapper watched him until the trees took him and then turned. The 6 orcs were still at the fence line, all of them watching him. None of them had gone back to work. He walked back past them without stopping and went inside the cabin. He sat at the table and did not build the fire for a long time. Then he built it. That evening he found the elder orc in the barn doorway and told her what the rider had said. He did not soften it. Someone will come who says you belong to them. The elder looked at him. When? She said. Few days. Maybe more. She looked out at the dark for a while. Not at the road, at the tree line, the same as always. The trapper waited. Good, she said. He went back inside. He did not sleep early. He lay in the dark for a long time and listened to the quiet past the wall, the sounds the barn made, the sounds the trees made, the difference between them. 3 days after the rider, the horses came. He heard them before he saw them, horses on the lane, more than one, and put on his coat and went to the door and stood on the porch. There were 3 of them. The man in front was not the slaver from the road. He was older, thicker, better dressed for the cold, and he carried a document case across his saddle. Behind him, 2 men in plain coats, armed more than travelers needed to be. They came to a stop at the edge of the yard. The trapper did not step off the porch. He did not speak. The man looked at him, and then at the homestead, and then at him again, the way a man looks when he is deciding how a thing is going to go. Whatever he had expected, he was still deciding if this was it. Then, from the barn, the door opened. The elder orc came out first. She did not hurry. She crossed the yard and stopped to the trapper's left, not facing the men on horses, not facing away. Just present. From the fence line the others came. Not together, not in a rush. One and then another, and then the rest, each of them coming to stand where there was room to stand. The younger orc came last, still not fully well but upright, and took a place on the trapper's right. Nobody had said a word. The man with the document case looked at the 6 orcs for a long time. He looked at the trapper. He looked at the men behind him who were looking at the 6 orcs. He cleared his throat and made his claim. The road transaction was not authorized. The orcs were under prior contract to another buyer before the column's leader ever accepted the pelt. The trapper was holding property subject to a legal claim that predated his purchase. He said it all in careful, settled language, the kind that has been used before and expects to be used again. The trapper waited until he was done. "I have the pelt receipt," he said. He did not reach for it. He did not offer it. He said it the way you say a fact that does not need to be shown because everyone already knows it is there. The man on the horse looked at the 6 orcs, then at the trapper, then at the men behind him. He was not a fool, which was exactly why the count he was running was not coming out right. What he had come to do required the other side to be uncertain, or isolated, or afraid. He looked at the trapper's face. Neither of those things was here. Something moved across the man's face. Not fear, exactly. The recognition that this was a different kind of ground than he had planned for, and that a plan that did not account for the ground was not a plan anymore. He gathered his papers. "This isn't finished," he said. "I know," the trapper said. The man pulled his reins, and the men behind him pulled theirs, and they went back up the lane the way they had come, not fast and not slow, the pace of people who do not want to look like they are leaving because they have to. The trapper watched them until the lane was empty. He did not move until the sound of hooves was gone. Then the elder orc turned and went back to the fence line. The others followed, the younger orc last. He paused for a moment and looked at the trapper, then went after the rest. The trapper went inside. He put water on for the evening. That evening they were all inside. Not in it the way you are inside when there is nowhere else to go. In it the way you are when you have chosen to be. The cabin had never held this many people. He was not sure it ever had, even before. They were in the doorway and on the floor, and one of the 4 was sitting on the step with his bowl in his hand and the door half open, close enough to be in and close enough to be out. The fire was going. The cabin was warm for the first time since the cold came in, full of the smell of food and damp wool and people. The trapper had cooked more than he had planned, and it had not been enough, and he had made more, and everyone had eaten. The younger orc told a story. He was not a good storyteller. The story started somewhere and went somewhere else and looped back and started again in a different place. It was probably not true. It was about a bird, or something that acted like a bird, and something it had done that was either very smart or very stupid, and the younger orc seemed to think the question was worth asking. He took a long time with it. The others listened. Nobody told him to get to the point. The trapper sat with his bowl and listened. He did not say anything. He watched his cabin be full of people and did not know what to call what he was looking at. He did not try for long. The story ended somewhere, and nobody was sure exactly where, and that was all right. Days went. The fence finished. They cut wood until the stack behind the barn was taller than any of them, which was taller than most things. Someone, he did not know who, went up under the barn roof from the inside with boards and closed the gap that had let the cold in for 3 winters. He found it done one morning and did not ask. He did not need to know. The sounds in the cabin were different now, the particular noise of a place with people in it, which is not the same as quiet. He went back to the trapline. Not alone. One of the 4 walked out with him before he had reached the edge of the trees, not asking, just walking beside him, the way the elder orc had walked beside him on the road that first day. They set the snares without talking about it, one of them working each side of the run, and they came back when the light turned and there was nothing left to check. They had done this before. Not this exactly, but something close enough that neither of them had to think about where to stand. They came back the same way they had gone, and neither of them said anything about it. He noticed the carved piece of horn when he came in that evening. It was still on the fire surround, where he had left it after the elder orc had gone back to the barn that night, the same place it had been since then. But it was not sitting at the same angle. Someone had moved it, or moved around it, cleaned the ash and dust from the stone beside it without touching the horn itself. He looked at it for a moment. He did not say anything about it. He built the fire up and called to the barn that there was food, and went back inside to finish making it. Weeks passed. The worst of the cold broke the way it always did. Not all at once, but in stages. The snow at the edge of the tree line pulling back from the roots of things a little more each day. The light changed before the cold did. There was a point in the afternoon, mid-month, when the trapper looked up from the steps, and the light on the snow was different from what it had been, and he could not have said exactly when it changed, but it had. Not spring, not yet. The cabin was mended. The fence stood. The barn was warm and occupied. The trap line was running again with 2 people on it instead of 1, working the same ground faster than 1 person could have, turning a half-day's work into something they finished by midday and were home from while there was still light left. He sat on the steps in the afternoon and thought about the Pelt. He had spent the finest thing he owned on a road in the middle of nowhere, for reasons he had not had words for at the time, and had not tried to put words to since. He did not regret it. He did not regret it. Those were not the same thing, and he was in neither of them. It was simply done. The way a thing done is always done, settled into the past, the way good ground settles, and he was not going to reach back for it. He had the carved piece of horn in his hand. He had kept it in his coat pocket since the night of the fire, since the elder orc had sat across from him, and they had said the exact number of words that needed saying, and then been quiet. He had put it back in his pocket in the morning, and carried it since, the same as he had always carried it. He had carried it for 4 years before that. Since the last morning she had held it. Before that, it had sat on the shelf where she kept the things she had been given. He had never put it back on the shelf. He looked at it for a long time. Then he set it on the step beside him, in the open, in the light, where anyone who sat on these steps could see it, not hidden the way it had always been until now. The barn door opened, and the elder orc crossed the yard and sat down at the other end of the step. Not close, but on the same step. She did not look at the piece of horn, and she did not ask about it, and he did not explain it. They looked at the tree line, the way they always looked at the tree line, when there was nothing pressing left to do. "They will come back," she said. "Flat. A fact." "Probably," he said. He did not look away from the tree line. After a while he saw the rider, far road, moving slowly from one side of the gap in the trees to the other. Too far to read, too far to say if they were coming or going or neither. just a figure moving through the light at the edge of what he could see. He watched until the trees took them. He did not go inside. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like, it helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much. Channel name.